Change your mind, change your money, change your life. I am Coach Rob Lee Simmons, the host of this podcast, and let me be your tour guide to greatness. If I was doing any better, I would be you. Welcome to the Greatness Academy podcast. I have with me the Honorable Tasha Moore. She is the founder of We Unite, and she is also an author. And I am just joyous to have her because she was just like, "All right, let's do it." And I'm really thankful for that. How you doing today?
I am well. Thank you. The honor is mine to even be invited. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Oh man. So my guests know I love getting into the business. So let's talk We Unite. Tell me a little bit about the program and the business, and then tell me what you guys do.
Okay, so I am a sole individual business owner, so it's just me. Um, in that regard, as I say that out loud, I also say that the business is not entirely made up of me individually, because in the nature of the work, it is serving the community, serving youth and families. And so they're very much a part of the business as well. Um, and then people like you, people like community individuals that really believe in the purpose and the passion behind the business. And so it is literally We Unite. And that is how I came up with the name. So We Unite was birthed by a desire to still have the autonomy behind what I wanted to do in regards to publishing my children's book. And so in publishing the children's book, I initially decided that I would go the route of connecting with African-American publishing companies, period, because of the sensitivity, the vulnerability, and the raw nature of what I wanted to talk about in the book. And I feel like although other people can, outside of the culture, understand to a degree, unless you have in some capacity lived within the context of what society brings each of our individual cultures, then I don't feel like you have exactly what it takes. So I went to various different African-American publishing companies, and my manuscript was accepted by two different ones. But as I learned more about the process, I learned that it came with giving up some of that autonomy and that control, that ability to individualize what you wanted your project to look like. And so in addition to that, because of a children's book, for any children's book authors out there or aspiring children's book authors, one of the major key elements is the pictures that you create within that book. And so again, because of the topic of what the book is about, I wanted the pictures to be to mirror that, the words. And so that often also came with publishing with a company. They do everything from the manuscript, the editing, the images. And so I wasn't satisfied with that. And so I decided to start my own publishing company, which is part of what We Unite LLC does. In addition to that, outside of the writing the children's book process, journaling is one of the mediums that I oftentimes use in just being able to get ideas from my mind and my heart somewhere else, to be able to meditate and therapeutically focus on things that I need to, because oftentimes in our minds, especially just in the world we live in, things can be jumbled up and muddled in there, and then it's hard to actualize what your actual thoughts are. And so
Right, absolutely.
yeah, I use that as a process too. And so We Unite is not just necessarily for the publication piece, but it is forms of interviews, podcasts, journals, writings, and things of that nature. So you'll see all of that on the site.
So where did you find your passion? When did you realize, hey, writing and journaling is my thing?
I didn't actually. I wouldn't say that writing and journaling is my thing. I would say that telling a story is my thing.
Oh, that's
And
good.
being able to be intentional behind the beginning, middle, and end of a journey and a process. And so I think that's what I would cling to the most. The drive and the purpose behind writing the book and creating the business was that I just wanted to, one, tell the story of many of the youth and families that I have worked with, had the pleasure of servicing over the last 17 years, to be able to give voice to a lot of the things that they experienced. I wanted to be able to do my part in creating something that had longevity in regards to the topics of the book. And then I wanted to be intentional about being a collective, and that is what is We Unite, as far as being able to keep in mind the old adage that oftentimes I feel like gets forgotten, and that it takes a village. Like, really, literally, it's nothing that you can do by yourself, I feel like. And so all of that, I feel like, is more my wheelhouse than the journaling and writing in specific.
So what made you feel like the community will always be a part of your business? Because that's a big deal. So saying that, hey, I'm building a business, it's going to be a collective. I would imagine you have a reproach of, hey, it's going to take a community to build this. But what made you realize this is the way it needs to go?
Mm-hmm. One, because in starting the process of writing, as I said, that wasn't really my wheelhouse. And so I literally had to lean on people that I knew, people that referred me to somebody else, like being able to have individuals that see your passion, see your heart, and want to pour into what you're doing, want to support that. And so that is what got me to this point today, in life and in starting my own business. And I also feel like people have to buy into what you're selling, right?
Right.
Because you can sell all day long, but who are you selling to if you don't have an audience to actually do that? And so that is a big component of the success of my book, or the success of the business, is the fact that people believe in the message, they believe in the content, and most importantly, they want to do the steps towards healing. Um, and so as we get into the topic of the book, I think maybe that'll make a little bit more sense.
Yeah, I want to get there, and I want to, but I got a couple of questions for you, right? So,
Okay.
um, listening to your passion is super nurturing. How much do you think being a mother and a sister plays a part in that nurturing part of your business?
Ooh, it plays a huge piece. One, in being a mother and wanting to work with kids and families, because I came from a single parent home. I'm a product of divorce, and I'm a product of all that that comes with at times. There are a lot of success stories for children and families, but there are more not successful stories in regards to what that comes with. And so, about the age of middle school, I probably was in sixth or seventh grade. Up until that point, I grew up in a very Baptist home. And so oftentimes what my after school looked like, or any type of community things I did, was involving church. And it was involving your neighbors and involving the people that, your family can trust, or my mom could trust, I should say that in specific. But by sixth or seventh grade, she realized that I needed to do some other things. And then that's how she connected me to the Boys and Girls Club of Metro Richmond. And then that is what spearheaded me seeing the significance of the village, because the counselors and the programming, the kids that I met there, served as a second home for me, and oftentimes more of a home than what I had. Not to say that my mom wasn't a good mom, but she did the best that she could, which is how all of parents are. Sometimes you have a blueprint, and you have a blueprint of positive things, and you have a blueprint of negative things, and you have to decide which way you're going to go. And so I would not label my upbringing as negative, but I would label it as not nurturing, not very loving, not very connecting. We did not have a very emotional connection. And I realized that that was something that was missing, and something that's missing from a lot of households and a lot of relationships with kids. And so all of that kind of spearheaded me wanting to work with other kids and work with families so that I could give back what I did not have and what was then given to me supplementally through other things.
So see, now that's a good transition. So no crying allowed. Tell me about it.
Yeah, so no crying allowed. I'm gonna hold this up just so that audience members can see it. No crying allowed. The extended topic is I'm sorry, the extended title is A Boy's Journey to Understanding Hidden Emotions.
Mhm.
So I have worked in the capacity of community service, education, mental health for like the last 17 years. Really literally, if I had to do something else, I have no idea what that would be in that regard. I oftentimes want to do many other things, but it just doesn't come as natural.
Right.
But so in those capacities, oftentimes my job was to figure out how to educate families, figure out how to help support children throughout their oftentimes challenging times that was connected to trauma, community violence, family violence, drug abuse, mental health types of things, lack of emotional capacity. And so I was oftentimes that bridge and trying to help them to figure out those things in a multitude of different avenues. And so No Crying Aloud is a boy's journey, really a boy's voice and an African American boy's voice in specific. And many of what I worked with boys' voices in regards to the trauma that they experience and how that shows up in their life. A lot of people oftentimes ask me, well, obviously you have a girl, I'm a girl mom. Why didn't you write a book about a daughter, about a girl? But to me, that our African American males are such a such a culminating group of kids, men, young men, and men that really need the help and support to get to a place of being seen, being heard, being understood, and understanding all that comes with life that you oftentimes carry, on your shoulders, carry in how you handle relationships, carry in how you are able to even process things down to kids going to school and being expected to learn so many different things. But oftentimes they come to school carrying so many things that's not their hierarchy of needs. Being able to do math or English or history is not a hierarchy of needs when maybe that night you had no dinner. You had no bath. You didn't have clean clothes to put on. You didn't even sleep in your own bed because you're sharing your bed with your siblings or your family members, or not a bed at all because you're sleeping on the couch or on the floor. You may have also ended up going to bed with gunshots in the background or arguing in the next room. And so it oftentimes, I thought, especially working in an educational field, was then characterized as a bad child, a child that has a bunch of mental health issues, a bunch of illiteracy and academic issues. But from my experience and my schooling and all of the things that I have learned, oftentimes that looks like trauma. Right. And trauma is not something that is talked about in the educational system as much. And it's also not something that's talked about in our community as much, and that we all experience it. And whether you live in a impoverished neighborhood or you live in a thriving neighborhood, the world is full of trauma, and we just oftentimes don't discuss it, we don't talk about it, and we don't recognize how that impacts us on a regular basis.
So when a reader reads your book, what should be a few key points and a major takeaway from it after reading?
Oh, that's good. Key takeaways from the book would be, one, I wanted to talk about mental health at an early age. I don't feel like that is done enough,
That's good.
especially within our particular culture, because we oftentimes hear that what stays in the house, what goes on in the house stays in the house. You don't talk about any of those things. When you think about going to therapy or a psychiatrist or any other mental health person, you think about being labeled as crazy, or labeled as somebody that got to take medication, to be able to function. And our kids are experiencing that trauma, experiencing those labels, and experiencing that verbiage at earlier and earlier ages, and they don't know what to do with that, I
Right.
feel like.
Right.
And oftentimes in our educational system, our teachers and our educators are the ones that are having to do a lot of that nurturing work to try to reach the child and reach the family as a whole unit. Because we know that kids come from somewhere. And so, regardless to what's being poured into the child in an academic setting, they still have to go home. They still have to go to other, people that are raising them. And so I wanted to be able to give voice, one, to the kids that are experiencing those mental health challenges and that trauma, and be able to have them read a book and see themselves, as well as being able to hear words that relate to their actual daily experiences. Two, I wanted to be able to debunk that myth that boys aren't able to cry, because crying is a natural emotion,
For sure.
right? It's something that we all feel, that we all experience. It's not gender specific. And so I wanted to be able to feature, that's one of the reasons, to get full circle, why I wrote the book about a boy. Because you oftentimes don't hear anybody telling a girl, be quiet, shut those tears up. I'll give you something to cry about. Go sit down. Tough it, tough, be tough. You the man of the house. You little man. You got to be this or that. You don't
Right.
hear
Right. Right.
girls being taught that, or hearing those things. And so I wanted to be able to debunk that myth that emotions are not gender specific. And I actually believe that crying is good for the soul. That's one of the things that I have in the book, because it helps you to heal. And it helps you to actually connect with the emotions that we all feel. And then I wanted to be able to talk about mental health in an educational setting. So the main character here, Devin, it follows him throughout a school day, to the point that he is experiencing his normal life and what could be considered a lot of traumatic different events before he gets on the school bus. Then he gets more when he's on the school bus, which is reality for a lot
Right.
of our kids. They
Right.
get bullied, and so they come into school with that. And then they come into school with expectations of what they're supposed to be doing. And when, like I said, the hierarchy of needs is not there for them, they just want to talk about what happened last night or on the bus before they
Right.
get into something else.
Right.
And so being able to talk about how trauma plays a part in our kids' lives, especially from an academic setting, I wanted to be able to talk about that too, so that hopefully our school systems do a better job at recognizing how we need to incorporate mental health into our school systems, so that we are nurturing the child and every child from a holistic standpoint and not just standardized ways, because every child is not standard, that's for sure.
No, absolutely. And so, where can our viewers and listeners find your book? How can we purchase that book?
So it can be purchased on Amazon. If you type in "No Crying Allowed," then it usually pops up. It's the only book in the literature section online that's there. So that was good for me. Um, and then you are able to go on my website. You can purchase there as you peruse all the other things that are connected to We Unite as well.
So let me ask you this, right? So when it comes to journaling, the publications, um, and then the work that you do within the community, what does a job well done look like for you?
Ooh, you got me there. Let's see. A job well done. I would say a job well done looks like reaching at least one. That's one of the things that I have to remind myself of every day because for those who are in helping fields, who are first responders, who are educators, who work with kids and families, you recognize that one, it's a thankless job, and two, you don't get immediate reward.
Right.
And three, you might be working with a classroom of 25 or a family unit of 10, and you might only get to that one. And you just hope and you pray and you put the passion and the heart behind getting to that one, hoping that the message that you are sharing, the work that you're doing will impact them enough to one, change their lives, and then give them the encouragement and the motivation to take that and change somebody else, to do the work outside of what you're able to do in the environments in which you are in. And so just being able to recognize that the job is well done when you go into it with the heart and the passion that you intend to, when you give it your all, when you treat people how you want to be treated, when you are vulnerable, when you tell the truth, when you listen, and when you know that you've done all of that, everything else is in God's hands.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love how you did that. You were like, all right, I think you got me. And then you're like, no, not today. I love it. I love it. So what's next? What's next on the docket for you? Any more publications? What's the next event? Tell me what's going on. What's next? What's happening next?
Yes. So I am long overdue with writing another book. I intentionally wrote the book not to just feature Devin as the main character, but a lot of the antagonists in the book are highlighted throughout that, and so that I can then tell their story as to why they're showing up with their level of trauma.
Wow.
And so that is my goal, especially to be able to write a book, the next one being targeted for girls. So we won't leave our girls out there. And so I also want to, especially in this digitized age, be able to create read alouds online so that for those who are not just physically holding the book, you can actually go online and view some clips, be able to read the book, and be able to utilize that in a lot of different capacities, especially for trainings, for workshops, for classroom purposes. And then I also want to create some other things to go along with the book. I actually, when I wrote this one, wrote a manual in terms of adults being able to recognize trauma. And so I want to publicize that. And then I also was recently just awarded the SWAM status, so small women and minority owned business status, and that opens up, I feel like, thank you. I hope that that will open up a lot of doors and being able to connect to larger entities, because the goal of the three things that I mentioned is not just for the school systems, it's not just for therapy, it's for people as a whole. Right. And so I want to be able to tap into markets that are outside of that oftentimes probably think like, this is not for me, but it actually is. So
yeah, I mean, this is amazing. I love to give like my listeners like all the free game, and I know they're just sitting there like me taking notes like, yep. Like you just like went through my whole childhood. Yep, check. And I'm gonna read the book because she said I can cry, so I'm gonna cry, right? But the one thing, I know you probably briefly mentioned it, but I want to kind of go back into the structure of writing a children's book. I know you mentioned like the illustrations being important, but can you kind of outline what the full process looks like for you? And then if someone was interested in writing a children's book, what would be some advice that you would give them?
Okay, sure. So part of what I describe is my process of going the publication route through a publishing company and then deciding that I wanted to do it myself. And so that's the main thing that I was, well, I'll back up a bit. One, be able to, I would say personally, understand what you're writing and the why behind it. Because anybody can write a book, but is it going to be quality? What's the message that you're trying to invoke, and who are you trying to reach?
Right.
I would do the research to make sure that it's a market that is not super saturated, because then you'll just have competition. And, you know, in the field of literature and children's book, you kind of already have competition because there are lots of children's books. But if you are intentional behind, like I said, what's the why behind it, what's going to help you carve out your niche, then that'll lessen that competition. So definitely do your research and ask yourself first the why. And there's lots of options of publishing books as well. You can be a adult author, you can be a children's author, you can write nonfiction, you can write fiction, you can just create your own podcast or your own what do you call it, like your own website that just features some of your publications.
You
You
can
know, you don't
blog,
have
you can
to,
blog.
yeah, your blog, yeah, blog, that's the word I was like, what is
Mhm.
yeah, that one. So you can blog, you don't even have to actually write. So know exactly what you're trying to do and the why. Research your market, and then determine if you want to write a children's book or an adult book. If you want to write a children's book, then that's a complete different path, especially because you'll have to get with illustrators. If you write, you know, chapter books, for instance, then you don't necessarily have to have pictures. So you have to decide. And then you have to decide if you're willing to do all of the work behind the publication process, which you would have to do as your own individual publishing company, or if you want to go with an actual publishing company that does all of the things for you. There's pros and cons to that, as I shared. Like, you are with a publishing company, unless it really matches everything that you're looking for, then you are then giving up some of that autonomy of how you want your project to be individualized. And so you have to make that choice. One of the things that I learned in doing that is sometimes that does close off the markets in which you're able to get into, because, for instance, larger book companies like Barnes and Nobles, which is kind of phasing itself out, unfortunately, but yeah, Barnes and Nobles or bookstores will actually only put your books in if you publicize with well-known publishing companies, as opposed to being in, you know, self-publisher. So you have to think about those things. And then if you are self-publishing, then again, you have to know that you're going to do all the steps. So the first step that I did was write the manuscript. I actually shared the manuscript with people of authority within the topic that I wanted to talk about. So social workers, school counselors, parents, single moms, single dads, being able to share it with the first, and you need to make sure you trust people too, because, you know, some people can take your things, they can take your idea, they can make it something else. So make sure you have trusted individuals that you're doing that with. But I would personally suggest doing that, because what you think is good may not be good to other people, because again, you're trying to sell to somebody, so you want to be able to reach an audience, and that what you're trying to communicate is actually being communicated and received by the reader. And so I would do that step first, just so that you can tweak the manuscript in ways that is delivering the content that you really want to deliver. And then from there, you take it to an editor to make sure it's actually grammatically correct in the ways that it should be published. And then from there, I took the manuscript to an illustrator. Before I took it to the illustrator, I actually, and this might just be my personality of being super organized, and but I actually drew up, not physically drew, but created a spreadsheet of, all right, these characters, I want them to look like this. I want them to have this skin tone. I want them to have this hair. I want their clothes to say a message. I want them to be in this environment. And so I took that as kind of just raw sketches and ideas of what I wanted, to make sure that at least my vision was there first. And then when I got with the illustrator, I was like, these are the do's, definitely do these, but then also use your creative artistic expression to fill in the gaps, because you don't want to be so rigid that you lose the artistic creation behind the process, especially when you're doing a children's book. Um, and then from there, I just went back and forth with the illustrator to make sure it matched. And then I got with a designer, which was the same person that helped me to put the whole thing together to make sure that each page had the right amount of words on there to match with the illustrations, to kind of narrow it down, deciding what font, what size book, hardback, softback. There's so many different things.
Yes.
And then you have to decide, where you're going to actually publish. I specifically use KDP and Amazon. It's user friendly. They're making some changes now. So if you get into it now, then make sure you're reading, the fine print in terms of what that comes with. But that was a streamlined process for me that helped me to be able to be in control of it and do it in the steps that I could. And then from there, you just print the copies. I mean, there's stuff in between there, making your website, if you're going to have one, creating your social media, because that's the age that we live in. Some businesses are able to thrive without it. It's still needed. Visibility and the presence is
For
there.
sure.
So creating some type of social media, even if you start there without going to the website piece of it, but getting your actual content out there is important outside of just, your neighborhood, your friends, your church, the people in your immediate network, because you oftentimes think that those people will support you, but it doesn't happen.
It don't work that way.
So
Right.
get out there and market, figure out how to connect with groups, do some networking, do some things that is going to get you connected with people that are outside of your your box, so that you're not just publicizing to who already knows you, because the goal is to get with people who don't know you so that you can have a broader reach. So I'll stop there.
Like if I knew 80% of that before I got started, because I am the type of person that I like to ask, but a lot of times people don't have the answer, Sway. So it's crazy because Sway had the answers, but I didn't say I struggled. I am very thorough when it comes to doing my own research and then finding a path. But if I would have had that information, like that is to the T, the way I would have done it. Well, let's say that I'm already working on a second work, and I'm doing it that way as opposed to my first one where I'm like, all right, I'm gonna write it. All right, now I'm gonna build a cover, and then I was just all over the place. But that particular structure is outstanding to a writer. Let me ask you this, right? So I always ask every person that comes on my show gets this one question.
Okay.
And it's a fun one, right?
All
So
right.
we didn't get into a lot of money talk today, but as you know, I am a life and finance coach. And one of the biggest questions I like, because I can find out a lot about people when I ask this question, but I'm not gonna
Uh-oh.
analyze everything. But it's just fun to ask. So, what is the largest purchase you've ever made, and how did it make you feel?
Ooh. Um, the largest purchase I ever made was my first home.
Yeah.
And it made me feel, it made me feel like I was doing my part to change generational curses. I was the first in my family to own my own home. Um, I was the first in my family to do quite a bit of things, to include being an author and starting my own business. But I wanted that for myself. So, part of what I shared was just kind of my upbringing, and part of that upbringing came with being really transient a lot, which I'm sure that you can, empathize with, and being in the military in times that you've had to move around potentially. But it came with moving a lot. I moved probably before I went to college 8 different times. And so I didn't have the opportunity of being an adult and going back to my childhood home and still, having my room, or growing up with friends and neighbors that I knew my entire life. And so that was something that I had to heal from, and something that I wanted to change within my family that I wanted to create. And being married and having children is having the stability of a home. And so with those things came me understanding the significance of good credit, of saving money, of going to first time home buyer classes so that I didn't get sucked into the process of paying, too much money. Finding the sites that helped you to understand the different parts of the neighborhood, good school systems, like the taxes, all those things are important.
Right.
And so it helped me to start the financial stewardship that, again, my family didn't have. And then being able to sow that into my own home so that I can get a return on my investment. That was one of the things that I knew that I wanted to do.
That is, I mean, you just dropping gems. I love it. Uh, everybody knows I win once again because I feel like this. I know how to pick them.
Yeah, there's a story behind
Yes,
everything.
I
Yeah.
love
And
it.
yeah, that comes with that vulnerability, hopefully, and sharing. It cannot be easy to do, but I feel like it's part of the therapeutic process of knowing that your story is, although there are going to be individualized parts of your story, oftentimes your story can be the same with people that you don't know. And the more we share, I feel like the more that we become um, okay with being vulnerable and actually connecting as a human race. So
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, just asking questions. Sometimes you never know if you'll get the true answer. You never know what somebody will say. So
And I think I did, and I don't mind sharing, but what you said really hit home, and I felt like a counseling session because when when I was younger, I moved a lot. Of
Mm,
course, even after I turned 18, no, probably 19 or 20, I moved to Hawaii, and
mm,
then I joined the military from there. And I've been literally been moving my whole life, and I think I finally figure out why it's really hard for me to connect with people because I know I'm gonna move. But I never
mm.
thought about that. Like I even like use like, hey, I bought a house, I settled down, and like I bought a house and I moved, and I still own the house, but I still moved. I mean, and it's just like,
Whoa.
yeah, I gotta find that whatever it is, and I don't know at my age if um I can talk myself down from not moving at this point, but maybe I just got to talk that out. But I really
Yeah,
appreciate you for
talk it
bringing
out.
that
I
up.
think you can. I think you can.
Yeah,
And even at the same time, owning your own home is a financial investment, period. And so even though it may not be your permanent spot, hopefully it'll help somebody else who
for
might
sure.
be living in there to be able to rent it, another family, another individual that might be having a hard time and looking for their home to be in. And so I am a firm believer that everything happens for a reason, but I'm also a firm believer that we endure a lot, we take on a lot, in growing up as children. um and it's oftentimes not until you're an adult until you start seeing those things manifest and you start asking the question why. And if
Yeah,
you can ask the question why, then that's the first step. And the second step, I think, is figuring out how to get to the answers. So hopefully you'll get to the answers so that you can reach that level of peace and permanency that comes with having your own home. Not that moving is not a bad thing if you're doing it on purpose.
right,
Like if
right,
you want
right,
to
right,
travel the world and you want to see different things, then by all means. Like if I didn't have a kid, I probably would do that myself. Or at least if she was older, because she's only 4. So I don't want to do that to her. But
right,
um yeah, hopefully you'll get to that point.
for sure. Hey, first of all, I want to thank you for coming on the show. We say winners win, and we win when you win, and we want to thank you for being a winner.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you for helping me to win.
Oh
Thank you for
man.
being a winner too.
Hey, all this smiling I do, I'm gonna get in trouble after my wife watched this episode.
Uh-oh,
Why
why
all that cheesing you was doing? I wasn't. I gotta be on here like this.
wife is all love. It's all love. And you got a winner. Just
Yes.
remind her of that. You got a
She
winner.
knows. Oh, she knows. She knows. Not just a winner, a goat.
Okay, I love
Yeah, yeah. But
it.
thank you so much for joining Greatness Academy podcast. Really appreciate you coming on. I definitely want to invite you back, especially when your new piece comes out. And I really appreciate you sharing. I think I'm the free game king, but you just dropped so many gems. I gotta just take a back seat to the things that you've done today. I really, really appreciate you. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you too.
All right, and we're out. Boom. Thank you for joining the podcast. And remember, change your mind, change your money,